The Berlin Christmas market killer is shot dead by Italian police. Anis Amri was killed when he pulled a gun on officers asking for his ID. As so-called Islamic State publish a video of their man, Merkel warns terrorism is a recurring threat.
Also tonight, 2 arrested after a plane is hijacked in Libya and diverted to Malta.
Storm Barbara sweeps in with a warning of more bad weather to come. And
this is the best flight in the world!
How to beat the getaway, the passengers with a flight all to themselves.
This is the ITV Evening News with Alistair Stewart and Ranveer Singh.
good evening. Anis Amri, who caused deadly mayhem in a Berlin market, died in a gunfight in Italy in the early hours of this morning. The Tunisian terrorist eluded police and security services across Europe until a simple ID check in Milan cornered him. It raises more embarrassing questions for the German authorities.
It's emerged Amri, who had been on the radar for months, visited his mosque hours after the attack and then slipped through their fingers, first into France and then into Italy. Today, a video was released of him pledging allegiance to so-called Islamic State. From Berlin, here's our security editor, Rohit Katru.
Where and when it was filmed is not clear, but the sentiment is emphatic. He pledges allegiance to the IS leader. A video selfie, apparent proof he was inspired by the group. This morning his body lay on the ground in Milan after a shootout with police. He had been asked to provide identification. Instead, he produced a pistol from his bag, still lying on the floor. Later, the Italian Interior Minister confirmed the manhunt was over.
The
person killed, and this is the result of the investigation, is without a shadow of a doubt Anis Amri, the suspect of the terrorist attack in Berlin.
Anis Amri.
A 29-year-old officer, Lucas Scarta, is the man who shot Amri. He'd been an officer for just 9 months. His 36-year-old colleague, Christian Movio, was wounded on his shoulder. 3 nights earlier, shortly after the attack, he was captured on CCTV in Berlin leaving a mosque, the start of his trip across Europe. Not a secretive escape, but a brazen journey. We found the mosque today, a few small rooms in an apartment block. The sign said it had closed due to refurbishments and media lies. Some neighbours said they'd recently seen people come and go.
Not see Amir.
This woman told me she hadn't seen Amri. She thought the mosque had shut down. After Monday night's attack at the Christmas markets, he was spotted outside a mosque in the Moabit district in the early hours of Tuesday morning. He then left Germany for France, travelling to Chambéry in the country's southwest, making a train journey across the border to Turin before boarding another train to Milan. From the city's central station, it was then on to Sesto San Giovanni, where he was shot dead by police as he opened fire during a routine check at 3 a.m. this morning. Chancellor Angela Merkel announced a review of security and all the issues this case has exposed.
I told the President we will speed up the repatriation process and increase the number of people who will be repatriated.
He is no longer wanted, the man who slipped through net after net. And although the manhunt is now over, what investigators can't say is whether there are more suspects involved in planning this plot.
So, Rohit, the Berlin attacker is dead, but Angela Merkel warns the danger remains.
Well, in this case, perhaps, and certainly elsewhere, what's clear is that this man was not a so-called lone wolf. We saw him late on Monday tapping away on his phone outside the mosque. He had to be in contact with someone to upload that video pledge of allegiance to IS, and we know that he's part of a much wider network across Germany. These are pressing questions for investigators, but Separately today, we learn of the arrest of 2 Kosovan men. They're suspected of plotting a terrorist attack at one of Germany's biggest shopping malls. And so, yes, many concerns at the end of a year in which terrorism has become a new normality for all Germans.
Rohit, thank you.
Hijackers carrying a fake grenade and pistols have been arrested after they forced a passenger jet to land in Malta. It had been on an internal flight in Libya when the cabin crew were threatened. The hijackers initially held more than 100 passengers hostage, but they and the crew were eventually released unharmed, as Rebecca Barry now reports.
It looks like a routine landing as the Libyan plane touches down in Malta. On board, 117 people, including a baby. But also on this flight are 2 hijackers, armed with what turned out to be a replica hand grenade and pistols, threatening to blow up the aircraft unless their demands are met.
Contact started with the captain of the aircraft and the 2 hijackers, both male and probably of Libyan nationality. Hijackers were told that in order for any discussions to be entertained, they should release all passengers first.
It should have been a short domestic flight within Libya. The Afrikaya Airways plane left Sabah in the south of the country just after 8 o'clock this morning and was due to land in Tripoli around an hour later. But the hijackers forced the pilot to divert, landing in Malta at around 10:30 this morning. Finally, after hours of uncertainty, a group of passengers emerged, women and children the first to be released. And gradually, in small groups, all of those on board were freed. Then one of the hijackers appeared, waving a green Libyan flag. The men are reportedly supporters of Libya's former leader, Muammar Gaddafi, and did all this to promote a new political party. But after a 4-hour standoff, the men finally give themselves up. One kneeling on the tarmac as the other casually walks down the steps. In the sights of the world's media and the armed forces' guns, he places something on the floor, perhaps the fake weapons they've been threatening to use. Then the security forces move in. The men are now being interrogated by the Maltese authorities. A thankfully peaceful end to what could have been yet another deadly act of terrorism. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
Here, Storm Barbara has hit parts of the UK, bringing with it gale-force winds and torrential rain. It's forced the cancellation of many ferries, flights and train services, and hundreds of people have had their power cut off in northern Scotland and the Western Isles. Our Scotland correspondent, Peter Smith, has the details.
This is how Storm Barbara announced her arrival in Scotland. She's the Christmas guest no one invited, bearing gifts no one wants. The Christmas tree in Oban needed to be secured with steel cable, while waves were spitting onto the road here and seafront businesses prepared for floods.
Take these precautions every time there's a bad forecast. Maybe once a year we'll get the water actually coming in. We've only had a serious flood once in the last 25 years.
We're already seeing the waves starting to crash over the top.
It's getting dangerously close now, yeah.
Nervous?
A wee bit, yeah.
Today should be one of the busiest of the year for public transport, but there are no trains in or out of Oban and no ferries left the harbour today. These people are just trying to get home for Christmas.
Today we were due to go to Mull, Craignior on the 8 o'clock ferry, but it unfortunately was cancelled.
So you're trying to get home for Christmas?
Exactly, yeah.
It's touch and go now?
Yeah. Well, they're saying that it might be likely in the afternoon or evening tomorrow, but we'll have to see. We're going to have to go find a hotel for now.
Hoping to spend Christmas with the family, so there's a chance that might not happen now.
Barbara was expected to hit hardest in the far northwest of Scotland. Her blows left power cuts on the Isle of Lewis and torrential rain across the country. It wasn't just Scotland that felt the effects, as these pupils in Salford found out. Storm Barbara has done her worst here, but there has mercifully been no repeat of the cruel floods we saw in parts of England just before Christmas last year. She is moving east now, but the next storm with a name is not far behind. Well, that next storm has already been named. The Met Office put out a tweet this morning saying it will be called Connor. And Storm Connor is due to arrive at night time on Christmas Day, carrying on through into Boxing Day. It won't be as powerful as Barbara. Winds in Connor will only reach up to 70 miles an hour, whereas Barbara was up to 90 miles an hour. But it will affect the same parts of the UK. So if you live in the north and northwest of Scotland, it might be worth asking for extra waterproofs for your Christmas.
Peter, thank you. And there'll be a full forecast after this programme, or you can go to our website for the forecast for the next few days.
President-elect Donald Trump ramped up his nuclear rhetoric even further today, saying the US would outmatch and outlast any adversary.
Russia's President Putin, though, played down fears of a new Cold War, saying he doesn't regard the US as a potential aggressor. But as our Washington correspondent Robert Moore reports, it has raised more concerns about Mr. Trump's leadership.
Donald Trump is entering the Christmas holiday period, having deeply alarmed arms experts about his plans for the US nuclear arsenal. It follows his tweet yesterday, in which he spoke of greatly expanding US nuclear capability. No one knows quite what he means, and whether it represents the abandonment of arms control. It left Christmas-themed news programmes confused this morning. One of the presenters had just spoken with Trump by phone.
And the president-elect told you what?
Let it be an arms race. We will outmatch them at every pass.
And outlast them all.
And outlast them all.
All right, you can put that down as breaking news.
Those who work on nuclear arms control say Trump's tweet is reckless and irresponsible.
He's toying around with some things that he doesn't quite comprehend the implications of. If he wants a better relationship with Russia, it's not a good idea to start out by saying, let there be an arms race. Russia and the United States are obliged to stop the arms race by treaty, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It has been the policy of every American president going back to Reagan and before to reduce the excessive numbers of nuclear weapons the U.S. and Russia have.
In Moscow at his end-of-year press conference, President Putin this morning reacted calmly, saying Trump's tweet was not unusual. An apparent effort by the Kremlin to keep alive hopes of improved relations with the incoming administration. But as Trump prepares to enter the White House in less than a month, and with growing doubts about his readiness as Commander-in-Chief, the level of uncertainty about his presidency is only mounting. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
Here, there have been calls for the government to get a grip of the prisons crisis after dozens of inmates rioted at HMP Swaleside in Kent last night. It's the 6th serious prison disturbance since October. The Prison Officers' Union says there aren't enough staff, and Labour is now urging a major rethink on the number of people we lock up, as Angus Walker now reports.
Welcome to Swaleside!
Welcome to Swaleside, shouts one of the masked prisoners in this video, apparently filmed during the serious disturbance at the prison last night. Around 60 inmates took over a landing on one wing. It took 6 hours for riot-trained officers to regain control.
Staffing levels are a serious concern because we have such low levels of staffing. There is no control. The prisoners have control, and as you see, it's very easy for prisoners to take over a prison wing at this minute in time.
Another serious disturbance at a prison just a week after the riot in Birmingham. A different jail, but the same issues being highlighted. Overcrowding, underfunding, a lack of experienced prison officers, and a real sense of tension within the entire prison system. Since September, there have been 5 other serious prison disturbances in Lincoln, Lewes, Bedford, Birmingham and Hull. Weeks of chaos and disorder are putting pressure on the Ministry of Justice. Ministers point to long-term plans for prison reform. In a shift in policy, Labour is calling for fewer criminals behind bars.
It's time for some longer-term thinking about what prison is for, how to make it a genuine, secure and rehabilitative environment, and how we can stop them being warehouses or universities of crime.
A former governor of Swaleside Prison agrees. He says the prison population should be cut.
All the jails I've ever run have been full. And there are some jails where, local jails in particular, where it's 2 to a cell, 2 to a glorified toilet really, and people can be banged up there 23 hours a day. And that level of overcrowding can lead to friction.
The Prison Officers Association is calling for 13,000 more guards. Talks with the government are planned for the new year. Angus Walker, ITV News, Swaleside Prison, Kent.
Hundreds of plumbers are facing bankruptcy, even losing their homes, because of a massive financial hole in an industry-wide pension scheme. They were told earlier this year that they are liable to pay, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of pounds each. The government says it's looking at the issue but cannot give any guarantees, and that's making it a worrying Christmas for those affected, as our business editor Joel Hills reports.
Len Newman worked as a plumber for 45 years. He had one employee who he enrolled in a defined benefit pension scheme. Len retired in 2015, but in April of this year, he was told he owes the pension scheme a debt of what he calculates to be around £80,000.
So where will you find this 80,000 from if you have to pay it?
Well, I can't, other than the value in the house.
You'd have to sell your house?
Yeah.
How distressing is this?
Very, very. I mean, it's sleepless nights. It's an unknown situation. You don't know how long this is going to run for.
For 30 years, Len paid into the plumbing pension scheme on behalf of his employee. The scheme has 35,000 members and more than 4,000 employers have supported it. But over the years, the number of employers has dwindled, and a change in the law in 2005 left a minority on the hook for a scheme that's running a buyout deficit of £1 billion.
The pension trustees have written to 800 plumbers, half of whom have already left the scheme, to tell them they face additional liabilities. Now, these are people who operate their businesses from a van, who employ one or maybe two people. They are not millionaires, and yet the potential debts they have to pay are colossal.
We've seen letters from plumbers who are worried they'll lose everything. One says, "I've been given an estimated debt and it's a staggering £850,000. The net worth of our company is approximately £150,000. Another says, "We're a small family plumbing business and we've been told by plumbing pensions that our debt could result in the loss of all our personal assets." Ros Altman told me that as a minister, she pushed for the law to be changed.
I don't get the sense that the government understands how dreadful this is for the people that are going through it. And I did have an indication that somebody had taken their life because they just couldn't cope with the thought that they were going to be made bankrupt as a result of doing the right thing.
The pension trustee is required by law to pursue what's called Section 75 debt, but in a statement it told us the legislation is not working as intended, and there is a real danger that if the law isn't changed, the future of the plumbing industry will be damaged. The government says this is a unique situation and it is working on a solution, but as it stands, it cannot give Len or anyone else a reassurance that their debt will be forgiven, and so the anxiety continues. Joel Hills, ITV News.
The Co-op has issued a nationwide recall of 165,000 chocolate Santas after batteries were found inside two of them. It says there were two alleged tampering incidents involving the hollow milk chocolate figures and is advising consumers not to eat them.
The Football Association's charged Burnley midfielder Jerry Barton with misconduct for allegedly making 1,260 bets on football matches over more than a decade. Barton, who only rejoined Burnley this week, has 2 weeks to respond.
And the tennis star Petra Kvitova has made her first public appearance since being stabbed in a knife attack in her apartment in the Czech Republic. The two-time Wimbledon champion says she has regained some movement back in her fingers.
The fierce weather currently affecting parts of Britain is a painful reminder for the good people of Cumbria. A year ago, many residents and businesses were still assessing the devastation wrought by Storm Desmond.
Indeed, some villages were cut off for months, and even now some haven't returned to their homes. But as Damien Green now reports from Cumbria, things are beginning to return to normal, and it's brought the community closer together.
A clear winter's day on Ullswater and a cruise in one of England's most beautiful places. The boats that ply this lake are part of the scenery themselves and part of the attraction. But just a year ago, in the wake of Storm Desmond, this Ullswater steamer presented a very different spectacle. driven aground to save her from sinking in the storm.
When they beached her, they sort of actually went over trees and things that you couldn't see. And there she was in the middle of the field, not just on the edge of the lake anymore, and that was a pretty shocking sight.
It's taken 12 months of hard work to repair the damage done by the floods. Pooley Bridge swept away, now replaced. The businesses that rely on the tourist trade had to work hard to bring visitors back to a village cut off for months.
We advertised in the local paper to say a free Pooley Ginger Bridge for everyone who comes between now and when the new bridge opens. And we had 4,500 bridges that we gave away to the locals, and we managed to maintain our business through that dreadful period.
And we had to actually evacuate this evacuation centre to Kendal Town Hall.
It's a year since the people of Kendal saw the streets of their town running like rivers, low-lying homes flooded, and for many families worry and hardship. But the churches that offered comfort and help and a dry place to stay, they're still here, still welcoming the people of the town.
It's been a good place for people to meet, because even next door neighbours who didn't know each other came here for just came here for shelter and food and got to know each other.
12 months ago, when I visited the Bush pub in Cockermouth, it had been gutted by the floods. Tonight it's unrecognisable as the same place. It's won awards for its beer and food because people kept coming to support it.
Very humbling to find out that these people have seen it happen on the TV and they've gone out of their way to come and support us. I didn't know them.
For everyone hit by Storm Desmond, this has been a very difficult year, and even now, 12 months later, there are some still feeling the effects. But everyone affected by those floods a year ago has certainly found out in 2016 who their friends really are. Damon Green, ITV News, in Cumbria.
And finally tonight, the once-in-a-lifetime chance that gave 3 friends an unexpected taste of the high life.
The 30-somethings couldn't believe their luck when it turned out that they were the only passengers on a flight home from Gibraltar to Heathrow. Nina Nanar reports on their party time.
So, we're currently on a flight and it's really busy. Really busy. Only joking!
In fact, for these lucky passengers, this was a private jet.
We are now currently on a flight of 3 people and it's fantastic.
Time to live like a celebrity, at least for a couple of hours. The ladies had been on a break in Gibraltar, but their flight back to London was delayed. At the airport, alone in the departure lounge, they found all their fellow travellers had got onto an earlier flight, leaving Sarah, Laura and Laurie Lynn as the only passengers.
We got on the flight and then the captain went, is this it? I've never flown a plane with only 3 people before. And we were like, this is it. And then I went, can we sit up front in business class? And they went, take your pick.
Laurie Lynn, yes. Are you feeling very posh? Oh, I love it. I've got my champagne in my glass. I'm home.
The champagne flowed, the 3-course meal was delicious, and the captain popped back to discuss the flight plans with them personally. And when they'd landed, he was able to invite all the passengers into the cockpit.
This is great. It was brilliant. First class, private jet from Gibraltar to London. Only 2.5 hours, but one of the best 2.5 hours of my life so far.
So a real taste of the high life, and all for the price of an economy ticket.
I am not going to say no to that.
And perhaps a sore head in the morning. Nina Nanar, ITV News.
They will dine out on that for a lifetime, won't they?
Perfect Christmas present.
That's all from us. Julie Etchingham's here at 11 with the late news.
But from the Evening News team, goodbye, and from all of us to all of you, a very happy Christmas.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.